Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. In this video, I just want to wrap up our content for the semester. We're going to be talking about inquiry and unit planning. And then at the end, we will go ahead and talk a little bit about housekeeping things that we got to wrap up for the rest of the semester. So let's go ahead and get started with unit planning. So as we look at unit planning, let's go ahead and start with the different levels of planning that teachers do. So we've been learning a lot about lesson planning, and that's probably what you'll do a lot of throughout your educational career. But that's not all teachers do. We do a lot of unit planning as well. And after you get some experience in the classroom, maybe even after you get a graduate degree, say a master's in curriculum instruction or something like that, you might do some curriculum mapping as well. But lesson planning is really that lowest level of planning that we do. It's just the day-to-day things you do in the classroom, but that all operates within a unit, right? So that's kind of the next level up, and then curriculum mapping is really at the very top, where we're looking at, what content are we teaching in what classes and in what order. So let's go ahead and get into unit planning just a little bit. So unit planning is really focused on the concepts and learning goals that are taught over a longer period of time, right? It's very much like a lesson plan, but instead of a lesson plan being like maybe 1 to up to 3 days, we're looking at about 2 to 3 weeks of instruction, sometimes longer, sometimes even a little shorter, but typically about 2 to 3 weeks of instruction. And a lot of times what I tell students to think of is when you have a textbook, you have the different sections that you do throughout the week in a chapter, and then at the end of the week you've completed a chapter, then over maybe 2 or 3 weeks you complete a unit. Okay, so it's a way to kind of think of how units unfold. Okay, now units typically address a number of standards and different skills. So typically in a lesson we would have maybe 1 or 2 standards. In a unit you're going to have a lot more, maybe even up to 6 or 7, 8 sometimes. It just depends on how long your unit is going to be and how, I guess, rigorous you want it to be as well. Now, some examples of units, just to kind of get us all thinking in the right kind of frame of mind here. So in literacy might be something around persuasive writing, where your students research an issue and then attempt to persuade others to take their position. Okay. Social studies, maybe a World War II unit, where students explore the causes and effects of the war on both the domestic and war fronts. And then in science, maybe doing something with the ocean, looking at students doing an investigation into ocean life and environments. And maybe in math, you're doing something with statistics, where students learn about how to calculate different statistical tests that they can do, and then interpret those results and make predictions based on them. And maybe tie it to a sporting event, because there's all kinds of stats within sports. Okay. So there's all kinds of things you can do with the units. And as you look at where unit topics come from, they can come from all kinds of places. A common place they come is any kind of cross-curricular connection. A lot of times we see subject areas that fit really well with one another. So science and math typically go well together, as does social studies and literacy. That's because in math and science, you do a lot of computation and interpreting of results in both of those classes. Where in social studies and literacy, we're doing a lot of research and writing. Now at New Tech High in Sioux Falls, they do a lot of this kind of cross-curricular connections. They have a class that's called BioLit, where it's biology and literature, which at first glance it's like, wait a minute, how do you make that work? But they actually do it really, really well. They have students reading Shakespeare, but then also doing some kind of biology-based learning as well. So it's pretty cool that they do those kind of things. They also have a class called American Experience, where they have, I think it's US government, American history, and some kind of literacy course all put together. I think maybe a writing course that they put together in as one big class, and they have like 40 students in it and 2 teachers. But it's really this kind of dynamic and interesting setup that they have. So you can always find those connections if there's those things that make sense that you're doing in science and math or whatever it might be that kind of overlap. Okay. Another area that you can look at to kind of come up with those topics is your content standards, right? So someone has gone ahead and put all those expectations that we have for what students should know and be able to do at the end of a grade. So you look at, well, within a subject, what kind of things fit together, right? So I went ahead and looked at the 6th grade content standards here in South Dakota for history. And I found, at least where there were more, but I ran out of room on the slide, but I have these 4 that really go well together. So it's, examining and analyzing the chronology of a historical event or events, considering alternative outcomes for historical events, so those 2 could really go well together. Comparing and contrasting primary and secondary sources to identify multiple perspectives on an event, well, that seems like it would fit with those other 2 as well. And then determine if a source is appropriate for answering a compelling question, right? All 4 of those would work really well together, and all of a sudden now we have the kind of the foundation for a unit, okay? So that's another way you can go about doing, kind of coming up with your unit topic. And then you always have your textbook, those curriculum guides that you develop or that come from a publisher. There's all kinds of things on the internet, tons of opportunity there. As we look at what is involved in putting together a unit plan, there's a number of different elements, and again, it looks very similar to a lesson plan that you might write. You have the main topics. What is it that students are learning about generally? What are the kind of those key concepts that they're learning, kind of those things that kind of cut across all of the different lessons that you'll do in the unit? So maybe it's persuasion, right? Are there any essential skills that you're focused on? So maybe it's things like communication or collaboration or perseverance and grit, those kinds of things. What are your goals and objectives? Very much like a learning objective, right? What do you want students to know and be able to do by the end of this unit? What content standards are you going to address in this unit? And then, you have your daily lesson plans, what we've been learning about for the past, several weeks. You might write some weekly plans that are a little bit more broken down, more of like an outline of what you're going to do throughout the week. And then, you have your assessments and that assessment plan of how your assessments kind of build on each other. And really, as we approach unit planning, it's very much in the same way that we would approach a lesson plan, right? You identify what is your outcome, where you want students to be at the end. You identify what is that evidence that's going to be acceptable, right? So what are you going to grade them on? Because when you think about a unit, if you're going to have a unit outcome, it's typically some kind of project that they're going to put together, and then you're going to assess their performance on that project. And then you plan learning activities throughout the entire unit and all your lessons that support them, that lead up and develop their abilities leading up to whatever that kind of culminating assessment is, okay? Now, just a little bit about unit goals. They are, again, very much like a learning objective. They just cover a longer period of time. I write them using the same 4 parts. So you still have a condition, a performance, a product, and a criteria. It's still a single sentence, right? And it's a sentence saying this is what students are going to know and be able to do at the end of the unit, okay? Again, really the only thing that's changed is that it's over a longer period of time. And you can have more than one of these, although typically you probably don't want more than maybe 3 or 4. Okay. Now with assessment, it looks a little bit different as well in units. Okay. So what I have here is kind of what I call developmental assessment, where your first assessment, once they've done that, they are really at the foundation for being able to complete assessment 2, right? It sets that foundation. And then once they get assessment 2, or excuse me, when they get assessment 2 done, now they have the foundation set for starting assessment 3. And then 3 sets the foundation for assessment 4, all the way leading up to however many assessments you have, all the way to the culminating assessment, right? That's the thing they're going to do at the end of the unit to show, what, they can achieve your desired outcome, okay? And as the unit progresses, they develop that knowledge, and it's very much like stair steps, right? You did the first step, now you have the foundation to go to step 2, and then to step 3. It's the same basic process. So that's how assessment works. It's a little bit different, and you'll get into assessment more when you take your educational assessment class during residency, and you'll be able to apply this in practice because it is during your residency. But this is the basic process for how it works and really what you need to know right now to be able to plan a unit. So some key considerations as you get ready to plan a unit. So what do you really want the students to learn? Right, that's got to be one of those things that you wrestle with right away. What is it that you really want students to learn at the end of this unit? If you don't know what that is, students aren't going to know what that is, and it's going to be kind of a long, 2 to 3 weeks, kind of trudging through whatever you have planned. Okay, so you got to really think, what are we going to do, and how's everything relate? And as you do that, you need to think about, well, what do students already know about this topic, right? What have they learned in the prior units? And then also, where are we going next, right? Because whatever you do in this unit needs to set the foundation for the next unit that's coming up too. And then you think about, well, how am I going to assess students in terms of what they know, what they can do, and any understandings that they might have? Okay, so what's that final assessment look like? And then, of course, you got to think about, well, how can you make learning interesting and authentic for the students while addressing any kind of required content that you need to cover? And then how long is this going to last, right? Is it going to last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, longer? Is it going to take maybe just a single week? Is it going to be a quick unit? Sometimes we see really short units too. They sometimes have special names. But how long is it going to take, right? Because once you know how long it is, you can start mapping backwards what you're going to do each day of your unit. Now, when I teach about unit planning, I also pair with it inquiry-based learning, because I think these things really, really work well together. Because you can do inquiry within a single lesson, right? And your lesson might take a couple days or something to get it done. But to do it well, it usually needs to be sustained over like a couple weeks, which makes sense for why, you want to do it with unit planning. So as we look at what inquiry-based learning looks like kind of at its, very most foundational level, right? We take out any kind of content, keep it content neutral. It's really asking questions. You have some kind of compelling question, whether it's the student asking it, the teacher asking it, or maybe there's a community partner that's going to ask the question, something that's grounded in some kind of authentic, real, possibly local, or even global issue that you want students to wrestle with, right? Something that's going to be interesting to them, provocative in a way. Then you give students time to research the topic in class, right? You spend a number of lessons throughout the unit where students get to wrestle with this topic and come up with their own solution, okay? Then they have a time at the very end of the unit to present their answers. And then the whole unit concludes, or the inquiry process concludes with students reflecting on the process. And what we're really talking about with reflection here is that they're focusing on what worked and what didn't in their problem-solving process, right? We want them to engage in what we call metacognition because they can think about their thinking. They're going to identify those ways that they can become a better problem solver. And that's really what the goal of inquiry is. And again, this is a very content neutral way of doing it. There are a number of different approaches, but we want them to be effective problem solvers in a number of different fields, right? We want them to be effective problem solvers in math and literacy and science, social studies, French, whatever it might be, whatever subject you're teaching, they can be an effective problem solver in those areas, okay? Now, as we look at the different approaches that are available to us, there's a ton of them, right? Can't remember how many there are, but there's one article that I think I have in the readings that lists a ton of them that are out there. I am a big fan of project-based learning. That's probably the one I know the best and I like the best, but that doesn't always apply really well in all content areas, right? It doesn't work the best in math, right? So problem-based learning seems to work better there, but that might not work as well in, say, social studies, right? So it varies kind of widely. We have the 5E model that's there. That's a very science-based one. We have the design-based learning, engineering design process. There's just a ton of these things that you can choose from. Okay, and that's what you're going to do in your research project. Okay, so let's talk about this. This is really our last major assignment in the course, and it's something I had planned before we, had all this craziness go on with the coronavirus. And it's an opportunity for you to have more flexibility and more autonomy over what you want to learn about. Okay, because you've really done a lot of great work this semester. Been really proud of all the work that you've submitted throughout the semester, and I think you've really earned this kind of autonomy that you can do whatever you want to do and learn about what you want to learn about. That's going to be of most value to you into your future. Okay. In the past, I've focused everybody on project-based learning, but that doesn't always fit well with what everyone wants to do or what your interests are. So I'm kind of trying to, at least to an extent, practice what I preach in class a little bit. Okay, so let's go over the requirements for the project. So it's a 30-point assignment. It is due on the 1st, so you have a couple weeks to get this done. And we have some flexibility with the due dates. Not a ton because we're into the end of the semester, but we have a little bit if you need a couple of extra days or something like that. You just gotta let me know. But there's 3 parts. Okay, first part is you're going to pick and research an inquiry-based learning approach. So say you pick project-based learning or the 5E model, whatever it might be. You're going to identify everything you need to know about that to be able to apply it in practice. Because that's the next step. You're going to create this unit, plan where you use that approach. Okay, so if you picked the 5E model, you're going to create a unit plan where you use that 5E model throughout the unit. Okay, and then at the end, you write a justification paper. So let's go ahead and go through each of these steps kind of one by one so you know what to do. So researching the inquiry-based approach. You can use really any source that you can find. I encourage you to use some academic, like journal articles, those kind of things. Those are great sources of information. But also, get into some practitioner-based resources as well. These could be things like Edutopia, PBL Works. There's all kinds of them out there. You just got to find them, blogs, those kind of things. That gets you into some of the actual, people that have taken this to practice and have reflected on that process for you. So it helps you learn kind of how to do it from people that have experienced it. Okay, so you can use any resource out there that you want, and I have a number of key questions for you to try and answer through your research. The first one is, well, what does the instructional approach entail and require teachers to do if they want to use it in their classroom, right? It's pretty straightforward, right? How do you actually do this in the classroom, right? If you're going to do project-based learning, what does that look like? Okay, how have others used this instructional approach in their classroom, both in and out of your subject? I think that's important to look both, if you're a math teacher, you're looking for math classrooms, but you know what, you're also looking for other classrooms that have used that approach. Okay, and you look for those examples because that's how you're going to learn how others have done it. Right? It's just like modeling in your own classroom. This is a way for those examples to provide that model for you as you do your research. Okay. You need to talk about what are the advantages of this approach. Why would we want to do it? What is compelling so many teachers to use your approach? And then how effective is it, right? What if teachers kind of anecdotally said, if there's education research that's been done, what's empirically reported in the literature, right? You go to that finding section or that discussion section in the research article, and what did they say? What did they find? Did they find that there were gains in student learning? Did they find that students were more engaged or more interested in learning, more motivated? What is it that really is, compelling people to use this approach? Again, kind of connecting back to what are some of those advantages, okay? Now, when you're done with this research, you're gonna use it, okay? You're gonna have to use it to create your lesson, or excuse me, create your unit plan, and then to also write your justification paper. So this is really the first step you gotta do before you're ready to do anything else in the research project. Now, the unit plan, your unit needs to be 2 weeks. You can do it longer if you want, if it makes sense. But 2 weeks is a nice amount of time. It's simple for your first one that we do together. And I want you to write unit goals. And again, model it very much off of the learning objectives that you've written in the past, right? Have those 4 parts, have a single sentence, those kind of things. You can have more than one if you want. It's up to you. Again, giving you more autonomy here. I want to see a content outline. And this is really, you're going to tell me what are students going to learn, in what order are they going to learn it, what content standards are you going to cover, and how are you going to make this content relevant to your students, okay? They've experienced things in their lives. How are you going to connect with that so it's authentic to them? You're going to come up with some weekly plans. Now, weekly plans do not equal lesson plans. Okay, I want brief but informative here. I don't want you submitting multiple 4-page lesson plans for each lesson you're going to do in your unit. Okay, because that's just like way too much work at the end of the semester. So I want this to be brief but informative. Okay, so what I'm looking for is how long are our individual lessons going to last? What is the learning objective of individual lessons? What content are you going to cover? And that could be a single sentence. We're going to cover I don't know, we're going to cover sentence structure, right? Something brief, right to the point. Just tell me exactly what you're going to do real quick. Your main activities, this might be an area where you give me a few sentences, right? Explain what you're going to do, and you give me those a little bit more detail here so that I can see that inquiry process, say if you're doing project-based learning, I can see how you're doing that in your lesson. And then I want a single sentence description of what your summative assessment is. I'm not looking for a rubric. You don't have to create any rubrics for this assignment. Just a single sentence. Students will write a paper, or students will create a PowerPoint presentation. They're going to create a movie, or we're going to take a test, whatever it might be. Okay. So these should be, like a thick paragraph is really what these should be. And then the last part here is I want a unit assessment plan, and this is going to be where you list the assignment, the content topic, and the standard all together in a table, and then you're going to explain how kind of each assignment builds on the next. Okay. Now again, you can have tests and quizzes if you want. It's up to you if you want to use them or not. And then I am not looking for any rubrics in this assignment. Okay, so you don't have to create any rubrics. I'm assessing your ability to create rubrics, through the lesson plan assignment. So we had already another one on how to create rubrics in our assessment assignment. So we're not going to do any more with rubrics this semester. Now, this is what the table looks like, and this is in the assignment description in D2L. But basically, you're just listing your assignment in the leftmost column, and then it goes in the middle column, the content topic that you're going to assess, and then you list the content standard that is aligned with. Okay, and the idea here is that we're aligning what it is that we are assessing in each lesson with the topics we need to cover and the standards that we need to be aligned with. Okay. And then our justification paper, there is no length requirement. So if you want to write something that's 3 pages, that's great. If you want to write something that's 1 page, that's great. If you want to write something that's 10 pages, that's great. Although I would probably go for conciseness, okay? Because I really only have a couple things that I want you to do. First, I want you to overview the key elements of the inquiry-based instructional approach that you chose, right? So if you chose project-based learning, what does that mean to be able to do a project-based learning unit in your classroom? right? And you need to support that with the research you did from the very first part of the assignment. Okay, so you're going to basically define what it means to do your inquiry-based approach. Then you're going to very, very clearly state how does your unit align with those key elements. And when I'm talking about how does your unit do that, I'm looking at how are your lessons, your activities in those lessons, the assessments that you're doing, how does all of that connect back to those key elements? So if you said that collaboration is a key element of your instructional approach, show me exactly where is the activity where collaboration is happening. Okay, what strategies are you using to get students to work together? Okay, that's what I'm looking for. That clearly, that direct, that overt. Okay, that's really important. Now, as far as what we are assessing, we are looking at your unit goal. That's going to be a couple points, so kind of a small bit, but an important bit. Your content outline is also not worth very many points, but again, it's an important part of the overall unit plan. Your weekly plans, okay, so that's going to be 5 points. Your justification of those key elements, so you're saying this is what the key elements are, and then these last two are really important. Okay, so the unit alignment with the instructional approach, that's using those key elements that you've used, and I'm looking, did you actually apply those in practice, right? Did you have that application of your knowledge in your unit plan? Okay, and then with the justification, looking at the argument, that part I'm looking at, did you make a compelling argument showing how your unit plan is aligned to that inquiry-based approach? Okay, and that's really assessing your ability to analyze your application of your knowledge. Okay, so similar but slightly different things that I'm assessing there. And those two make up a good chunk of the points for this assignment. Okay, so that is the research project. Again, it's due on May 1st. We can be a little flexible with the due date, but I would, encourage you to, work towards that and try to achieve that date just so we can stay on track. Otherwise, you'll be bumping into finals week and things that you have to do there. Okay, now to help get you started here, we have our last discussion that we're going to do. It's discussion 4, and it's going to be a simple discussion. Okay, it's going to be due, I changed it a little bit from what I presented the other day, a couple weeks ago. It's going to have one due date. It's going to be on the 22nd, which is, in just a couple days, I realized. But what all I'm looking for is what topic will your unit be over, and what inquiry-based instructional approach are you going to use, right? That's all I'm looking for, those two things in your last discussion, okay? Now, you can also feel free to ask any questions that you have regarding this assignment or anything, right? And then you're also welcome to provide any feedback that you'd like to your peers, but obviously that is not going to be required. At this point in the semester, what I'm really wanting us to do is focus in on finishing. There's a lot going on, and with this new format, it's really a bit more stressful than it normally would be at the end of the semester. And I know the end of the semester is always very stressful for everybody, especially for the students. So I want to make sure that we are making time, not filling it with other things that maybe would end up being more busy work than really helpful. Okay. So in terms of housekeeping, things that we need to be doing, you need to read the unit planning and inquiry-based learning articles that I have posted in D2L. They are generally pretty short, so that shouldn't take you all that long, and that content will be on our final exam. So you want to make sure you have that read before you do the final. Discussion 4 is due on the 22nd, so on Wednesday this coming week. Research project is due on May 1st. And then the final exam is going to be due on May 4th. And I will share specifics about the final exam next week. I will post another video where I go through, this is the content that we will be, the topics anyway, that we'll be going over. This is how many questions it'll be, that kind of like what I did for the midterm. And then we will have on the 28th at 12:30 in Zoom, Teresa Skinner, and this will be one that you don't want to miss. Teresa Skinner, she is one of our residency instructors, and she's going to talk about our teacher residency program that you're all going to go through. For many of you, that's where you're going to be going next. I know a number of you are starting in the fall, some of you will be starting in the spring, and then some of you will be starting a year from this coming fall. But it's helpful to know what's coming so that you can start preparing now for what you might be having to do. Because I know a lot of students that come through this class and get to this point don't realize that, one, that you're spending a whole year doing full-time, all day, every day student teaching, but that you're also taking anywhere from 3 to up to 5 different classes throughout the semester, each semester. of the residency program. So it's an important one to come to. I know it's a synchronous one. I've tried to avoid doing many of these synchronous class meetings, but I think it's an important one for you to come to. So go ahead and make sure you log on to Zoom. I'll have the link in D2L here over the next week sometime. And I am going to have the password Go Yotes in there, and it's going to be capital G and capital Y. And that's just to keep people out that shouldn't be in our meeting, okay? So with that, if you have questions, you know how to get a hold of me. You can email me, you can come to the online office half hour, or you can post the questions in D2L and I will respond to them then. Otherwise, have a good next week, and I will see you both online and then on the 28th here in just a few days. All right, see you later.